Hey everyone, and welcome back to the best year of your life. My name is April Seifert, and I am here with Sharon Salzberg, a meditation teacher, New York Times bestselling author, and the co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society. Sharon hosts a podcast called The Metta Hour, and she has written many books, including The Force of Kindness, Change Your Life with Love and Compassion, Real Love, The Art of Mindful Connection, and Real Change, Mindfulness to heal ourselves and the world. Sharon, I'm so excited to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be with you.
Today's topic is one of my favorites. Today we're talking about life purpose and vision. You know, it's the first day of the summit. It's a really big topic, and especially after the last couple of years that we've all gone through with the pandemic. I definitely have experienced this. I know a lot of people I know have experienced this. We're doing a little soul searching. We're thinking about what's important to us and really thinking about how we're spending our time and what's meaningful. Can you talk a little bit about maybe times like these, the ones that we've had recently, and what is it about them that makes us sort of reconsider and think about what's important?
Sure. I think the way that I often talk about it these days has to do with what was my most recent book, which was Real Change, Mindfulness to Heal Ourselves and the World, which was published. It was supposed to be published in June of 2020, and it came out in September of 2020. So obviously it was a very different kind of book launch. And because the book was postponed, a friend of mine was reading it just to read an excerpt of it. And he said to me, I like the book, but I keep reading those examples and thinking, that's what made you anxious? Wait till you see what's coming. Because I turned in the book in 2019, the end of 2019. So I went back to the publisher and I said, would it be okay if I wrote a new preface that somehow kind of gave a context for the book in these times? And they said, sure. So my tremendous question for myself over and over again was, what's still true in a time of shattered expectations and a lot of loss and anxiety and uncertainty? Like, what's still true? Like, what am I relying on? What am I counting on? What has not shattered as conditions have shattered? What has not diminished, even though maybe harder to actualize, to make real? What's still true? And so that's another way of saying, like, what is that kind of central narrative, that central purpose to my life that I can actually capture or recapture in the midst of any kind of conditions. And of course, that's what we were facing and are facing in, many ways in different degrees. The things we were counting on were all shifted. I'm speaking to you from Massachusetts. I also have an apartment in New York City. I was in New York City in early March 2020 when I had the thought, things are kind of tense here. Maybe I'll go up to Massachusetts for 2 weeks. And I was here for a year and a half. And so it's just facing difference, facing uncertainty, facing sometimes the need to redefine how we're going to relate day after day. We do count on something if we can find it, if we can trust it, if we can articulate it.
That's so true. It's interesting. You say those dates and they're all so burnt into our minds, and we almost have a emotional reaction when you think about, March of 2020, June of 2020, those really early days and all that we've been through since then. It's not shocking that we've all started contemplating what's important, and it would be actually really surprising if we didn't. So I love that. When you think about even outside of the context of what we've all experienced in the last couple of years, Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having a vision for your life, of consciously living on purpose, and what that means to you and what you can share with this audience about the importance of that?
Well, I think we actually tend to have a vision, even if it's muted, even if it's half known or pretty much unknown to us. There's often a narrative structure that is guiding our choices and our decisions. And the way I usually talk about that is here in Massachusetts. Uh, the town is Barre, Barre. Next door to my house is the Insight Meditation Society, which is a retreat center I co-founded in 1976 with friends Joseph Goldstein and Jack Cornfield. Um, Joseph and I had met in India, where I had gone as a college student studying meditation, oddly enough, and Jack had a sort of parallel life in Thailand, while Joseph and I were in India. We all met up in the States and began leading meditation retreats. And it was a very kind of haphazard existence. Like somebody would write a letter, as one did in those days, and invite us to lead a retreat. And we'd say, sure. And we'd go. And at the end of that retreat, we never knew if there'd be another retreat. And finally, somebody said to us, why don't you start a real retreat center in this country? So, and they went on to say, I know the people who can help you. They're all in Massachusetts. So we came back to the East Coast. We were all in California at the time and started looking for property. And we heard about this place, which at the time was a Catholic novitiate in Barre, Massachusetts. So we came here to look at it in December of 1975. And we were quite torn about what to do. On the one hand, it seemed like perfect place for a retreat center. It's very quiet, it's very placid, there's nothing much happening here. And on the other hand, the facility seemed really big. These were the days like before much research into meditation and its role in stress reduction and so on. And we kept looking at that building thinking, how many people in this country are ever going to want to learn how to meditate or this form of meditation? It's like maybe too big. So we went to downtown Barre for lunch, which is a very traditional New England town, which has a town green in the center of it. And in those days, there was a monument on the town green, which had engraved upon it the Barre town motto, which is tranquil and alert, which are two words that we constantly associate with meditation practice. We talk about deepening tranquility and calm and peace and strengthening alertness and connection and understanding and so on. So we took a look at that and we thought, okay, that's an omen. Any town that has a motto like tranquil and alert should have a meditation center in it. So we ended up buying the property. And here we are all these years later. So it turned out the property that we bought, which was a novitiate, had been built in different stages. In the earliest stage, the central part of the building was a private home. It was a mansion built by somebody named Colonel Gaston, which at one point he was the lieutenant governor of Massachusetts. So one day, looking up the history of Barre, we came upon some commentary about Colonel Gaston, which said that Colonel Gaston himself had a motto he tried to live by, which was, every day you should look every damn man in the eye and tell him to go to hell. So I took a look at that and I thought, I wonder how well he was getting along with his neighbors, who maybe were going around trying to be tranquil and alert. But I love telling those stories in juxtaposition because I think we really often do have some kind of narrative, some theme, some motto, even if we're not fully aware of it. And often it's actually pretty limited. It's very conditioned. It's very held back. It's very inhibited, which is one of the main reasons we want to make it conscious. We want to become aware of it and see if it's actually the narrative we wish to have guide our lives.
That is so good. I actually really love the juxtaposition of those two things. I had to laugh to myself with the second I bet he's the type of person where people see him coming down the street and you're like, oh, are you joking? Not today. I love that. And, starting is that narrative where you would suggest people start? Like, I love this notion that it would be there, but I hear some interesting pieces in what you're saying around there's some conditioning there might be limitations there might be areas that we might want to explore. Can you talk a little bit about starting with that narrative, how we get a good handle on it, and how we might explore some of the, I don't know what the right word is, maybe assumptions or rules or conditioning that might be limiting what that narrative is?
Well, sometimes people, there's so many ways of doing it, and it's exciting. It's a creative kind of thing to explore. Sometimes we do it through journaling, just writing down the exercise. Sometimes we do it through just reflection, without the journaling part. And there are different aspects to it. One actually goes back to what I was saying before, like, what am I counting on? To ask oneself that question, like, what's the steadiest thing I rely on? What gives me relief? What gives me perspective? And actually begin to articulate that. That, of course, may change, but may reveal some underlying truths. And then in direct work with the kind of aspiration or, that narrative, that motto for one's life, I would ask myself, what do I really, really want? And then, having ascertained that, just whatever comes to mind, usually what we say is, see if you can make it bigger. Because the wanting is not necessarily at all the problem, the yearning, the sense that there's something that can bring me greater fulfillment, greater happiness, greater meaning. It tends to be more the specificity, the narrowness of that. So, for example, we might say, I really want a lot of money. But nobody actually wants a lot of money. We don't want piles of money all around. We want what money symbolizes to us: security, leisure time, freedom, power, whatever it might be. And then if you look at that word and see, what are 5 other ways I might get that feeling? I might get that sensibility about my life. And then maybe you realize a lot of them are near at hand. It's right here. I'm just not holding it that way. I'm not utilizing it that way. Other things may be more applications we wish to try. We want to extend ourselves. We want to stretch and move into different terrain toward freedom, toward leisure, toward maybe I have leisure time that I'm completely wasting, which would not be unusual. So that I'm not having that sense of restoring. I'm not having that sense of adventure, whatever it is that I'm seeking. And so it's almost like you start to see your whole life as a creative medium, not just a canvas, not just a blank page, for writing, but your whole life is that creative medium. And what do you want to kind of dedicate it to?
That's so good. The question that you asked around what, along the lines of what steadies you, what do you go back to? I had a coach one time that asked me a question that literally knocked me over. I felt like it was incredibly powerful along those same lines of what would still be left if everything in your life fell away, your relationships, your job, the requirements, responsibilities, expectations, all of that. Like, what would you naturally do and how would you naturally be? And it relates so nicely to what you said, like, because that's the stuff that we come back to steady us. It's the stuff that we're drawn back to no matter what, that we would do even outside of somebody expecting us to do it or paying us to do it, or, any of those other pieces that tend to guide our behavior so much. That's so good. It's such a foundational way to think about it.
That's fun. That sounds like a fun exercise.
It was fun and also painful at times to think about. As you have done this work with folks and asked them to ponder these things, are there common barriers that get in the way, whether they are internal or external, that sort of trip us up from doing this work and fully, I guess, getting as deep as we could or should to uncover the answers we need?
Well, I think it takes some thinking through, to understand, for one thing, the distinction between aspiration and greed, and also fantasy, because I wouldn't myself form the aspiration to jump out of an airplane. That's not going to happen in this life, or climb Mount Everest. I was watching a film the other day of two brothers that I know who are Tibetan, and they were in some remote area of Nepal and going to visit this village. And all I could see was those tiny little wet, twisty paths with the possibility of plunging, like 1,000,000 feet into a valley. And I was like, and people were writing me saying, "Oh, isn't it a beautiful film? And aren't there smiles?" I was like, I couldn't take my eyes off those paths because they were terrifying to me. There are things I will not do, and I don't even dream about, and I don't care. I don't consider it a wasted life because I'm not going to do those things. And that's what we often think about. Oh, I have to have a goal like that, something that I feel like I can't do, but I have to master it. And I don't think it's like that. I think it's bigger than that. How do we define happiness, and where do we find that sense of being at peace, and things like that. And then there is a stretch often involved because we think we're incapable. I mean, not the things we are genuinely incapable of, like I'm incapable of climbing Mount Everest, although I'm sure somebody's going to write and say, well, you can, but that's right. But the things that it's really a self-imposed limitation or a culturally imposed limitation. And sometimes we work our way through it. We recognize it for what it is. We maybe even have a memory. My friend Joseph Goldstein, my colleague, often tells the story, for example, about it has two parts. One is he was in kindergarten or first grade, and he got a big red F on his report card for arts and crafts because he was messy. And I would say he was like the neatest person in the universe right now. But also when he was older, maybe 12 or something like that, he was in the high school choir, and the instructor told him to just mouth the words because his voice was so bad. And so then, of course, as an adult, he loved singing. He could never bring himself to sing. So he could actually identify that. And it's not that the goal becomes I'm going to sing in the Metropolitan Opera, because that's like me climbing Mount Everest. That's not going to happen. But can he express that love? Can he savor it? Can he feel the joy of expression that's not laden with those terrible judgments, about himself? And he ended up at some point taking singing lessons, not to improve his voice, but just to break through that barrier and to have a voice and be able to express it. So now he sings at the pop of a hat, and so it's things like that. It's not like having unrealistic demands on yourself and then punishing yourself for what you can't do, but it's realizing that there may be aspects of some endeavor, or it may be an endeavor itself, all in itself, traveling or something like that, that as soon as we think of it, we think, oh, I was always told I was too disorganized to do that, or I was always told something else. And you think, well, no, I'm going to step by step, really see what it would take for me to do that with all the fear and the attendant, fear, and just go for it. And that's what I think we really do.
That's so good. I'm curious about, you mentioned, I'll give the example that you mentioned just a moment ago around skydiving. Like, you don't have this inclination to, that's maybe not on your bucket list. That's the item that if you ask people, what's on your bucket list? What do you want to do before you die? Like that hits people's top 5 all the time. And actually the barrier to going to do that is relatively low. And that's an interesting activity because it tends to toe the line. There's the group of people who actually want to do it. They really do. And then there's the group of people who say they want to do it because it's going to sound good to other people. And I feel like that distinction trips us up sometimes. We put things on our own lists, not because we intrinsically would find value and meaning in doing them, but because we want to tell other people about them. Have you thought about that distinction at all and how to help people figure out what side of the fence they're on? Because you said it so confidently, like, nope, that's not something I want to do. And that's not what I hear from folks very often. So how do we start to figure out what side of that fence we're on? And is it something that is it intrinsically meaningful to me versus something that just looks really great for other people?
Well, that's fascinating. I would never in a million years put that on my bucket list. Ever.
And careful if you do, because I'm really good at talking people into going, but I will trust you that is officially not on your list and we don't have to go there. But
thank you. I mean, I said it because it's real, not because I knew you had anything.
Sure.
Any kind of experience.
Sure.
Like, I'm scared. I mean, even having a bucket list is an interesting kind of conundrum, which we can also talk about later. But well, introspection is a fabulous thing, and it's one of the great superpowers of mindfulness is that we see for ourselves. Somebody told us all our lives that maybe caring for others weakens you, that you end up too gullible, too vulnerable. You have nothing left for yourself. But what does it really feel like when you have that sense of solidarity or interest in somebody and you want to help in some way? Does that really feel like you're getting weaker? Maybe we've been taught all our lives that vengefulness is the greatest of strengths. And to go over and over and over and over and over and over and over the grudge is going to make you stronger. But does it? Let's take a look. So you can just do kind of sheer mindfulness. You can do mindfulness with a kind of active imagination, like picture yourself in that scenario. What does it feel like? And another question that I think is very important is, what do I perhaps have to compromise to make that happen? What do I have to give up? And is that worth it? I once was, I was teaching a meditation class in New York City, and the venue is really an art gallery. And so I was surrounded by changing exhibits all the time. And I was trying to give an example of what we would call kind of craving or greed that goes nowhere, really. And so I said, well, I can see that painting just off to the side. And I did an out loud sort of rumination on wanting that painting. I really want it. I really like it. I have to buy it. I couldn't see the price tag, but, nonetheless, I have to have it. And it ended up, as it went through these different iterations, with the realization that in order to be able to afford the painting, I'd have to travel constantly and work and never be in New York and never see the painting. But that would be okay because I'd own it. So that would be an example of saying, what I have to give up, is that worth it, actually, for a sense of ownership or possession or accomplishment even? And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But to be able to look for ourselves, not what someone else has told us we should believe, and we discover a tremendous amount.
I think that painting could be a metaphor for a lot of things in our lives. If you think about, as we've all taken a bit of a pause in the last couple of years and really had a chance to figure out what are we enjoying about being maybe closer to family or closer to home, and then what do we truly ache for and miss. there were some serious surprises there in terms of what I actually missed and the things that I would have thought that I would have, but I really didn't. And I think your point about mindfulness and introspection is an important one, not even just as a practice as we're setting our life vision, but maybe as just a chronic thing that we do as a consistent contemplation of what's truly important and what we feel drawn to.
Well, it's very hard to hear the voice within, but not impossible. And it's quite important. I also, what just came to my mind was this time many years ago, I was teaching in Israel. I was about to teach a course in Israel. And before then, I was staying in Jerusalem in the Old City and walking through the marketplace one day, which is kind of these narrow alleyways, like twisting and turning, that's teeming with life, with sights and sounds and goods for sale. And I was just walking along when I heard this merchant behind me call out to me, "Oh, I have what you need." And I stopped, and it was like this thrill that went through my entire body. And I thought, "Oh, he has what I need." And I kind of turned to go there, and I thought, wait a minute. First of all, I don't need anything. Second of all, how would he know he has what I need? But I realize we hear that voice all of the time. I have what you need, and I have what you need, and I have what you need. And if you only had this, and if you only became this, and if you only tried that, you would be perfectly happy. And it's dizzying because we kind of go round and round and round, influenced by different of these voices at different times. And so just stopping, pausing, asking oneself, what do I need right now? Or what's consonant with my larger story of how I want my life to look? And then we can relax, actually, because we don't have to take in all of those voices.
Yeah, it's interesting that voice, in addition to telling us, I have what you need, is convincing you that, to your point, that you have that need in the first place. There's something wrong. There's a gap to fill, and I can help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this work to cast a vision or for our lives or figure out what our purpose is, it can get frustrating. It can get difficult for people. It's hard to know when you've landed on the right thing, when it is truly what the direction that you want to be going. What advice do you have for folks who are frustrated? They've maybe done some exercises and felt like they haven't quite landed on it, or they're unsure as to whether what they're landing on is the right direction for them.
I think I would get kind of granular or more immediate, more moment to moment, and not ask in terms of like the adventure or whatever it is we imagine, but what do I want to bring to this day? Something like that, because I think that will ultimately lead us to a recognition and a real abiding in kind of a larger sense of purpose. So, for example, I wrote a book many years ago called Real Happiness at Work. And so I ended up after that teaching a lot or talking a lot to people about what fulfilled them at work, what they found fulfilling and what they didn't. And, research shows that one of the greatest sources of happiness at work is a sense of meaning. It's a sense of purpose. You're not just doing some tasks. So I was teaching a workshop, and this woman raised her hand, and she said, she was like absolutely radiant talking about her work. And she said, I work in a call-in center fielding customer complaints. And she said, I love everybody. I respect everybody. I'm honest with everybody. By the time they get to me, they've talked to 2 or 3 other people. They're completely freaked out. And I'm totally truthful. Like, I can't help everybody. But if I say I'll get back to you by 2:00, I get back to you by 2:00. And I just treat everyone with respect. And that's the goal of my day. And I thought a few things. One is, it could well be the case that was not her dream job, but she found meaning and purpose in helping people have a better day than they were having, and extending compassion and treating people with respect. And then ironically, I had just recently been a complaining customer myself, um, with a telecommunications organization, which uh, in which I did not feel I was treated that way. If anything, I was so frustrated, and so I felt so unseen. Um, basically, they were accusing me of things I had never done, and saying, "Well, that's why we're not going to give you high speed internet." And I was like, "What?" And it was just this terrible, terrible big deal, which took a long time to wind down. So then I was listening to her, and I thought, like, wow, I don't know where she worked, and it could have been a very different kind of entity, but I thought people make a difference in other people's day. And that's a place we can start. That's a place that is real, it's pragmatic. It's not like punishing yourself for not having vast enough vision, for your ultimate purpose. It's making your day purposeful, making your every encounter and conversation with someone purposeful. And that, I think, will lead us deeper and deeper.
And what's underneath what you're talking about is the idea that that's something that we do. We make our day
Mm-hmm.
purposeful. We find purpose in
Mm-hmm.
our work. We
Mm-hmm.
don't just stumble upon it. It isn't given to us. It's an action that we need to take in
Mm-hmm.
order to make that connection to a deeper purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can find that purpose, fielding angry customer complaints, we can find that purpose in a lot of places. That's impressive. Yeah. How about people who feel like they they've been living out of alignment, or I've spent so much time doing things that aren't meaningful, or maybe we feel like we've wasted time, or we feel guilty about the way that we've been living because it isn't necessarily in the direction that we want. What advice do you have for those folks?
Well, there's, the way we use language is also very interesting. Like often people will ask me a question that has a word like maintain or keep or never lose, like how can I never lose mindfulness? And I say, oh, that's not going to happen. Let's get real. You are going to lose it, but the key is really resilience. It's starting over. Maybe we have done something or said something very different than our deepest values, and we recognize that, we feel the pain of that because it's painful, and maybe lessons learned. Maybe there's something to learn in this, and that's different. Kind of picking up those lessons, determining to move on, start over, is very different than kind of lingering at that injury point. Like, I'm such a terrible person. I'm so awful. I can't do anything. I never, and just going round and round and round and round as though we are only that mistake, without the ability to actually change and move on. And so there's a certain amount of pain that I think is inevitable when we think, ooh, like I really blew it. But we don't want to stay there or get stuck there by any means. And so the key skill we learn is, well, first of all, self compassion, which does not mean laziness or weakness. It's actually a springboard for change, for progress, for learning something new, for changing a habit. Um, Self compassion is the most powerful tool we have. So we don't just linger, we don't get stuck, we don't identify with the worst thing we've ever done as though that's all that we were. We recognize our ability to learn, to grow, um, to do differently, to do better. And we realize it's never just me. That's what it feels like at the time. Like I'm the only one who's ever, said this stupid thing in a meeting or whatever. But it's never just me. And that compassion for oneself becomes a bridge to having a sense of being part of a larger human community, and realizing that we can have compassion for others as well.
That's amazing. It's you said something that struck me around you are more than this one thing that you've done. And I feel like there's a deeper lesson there, because you could take this one thing that you've done and put nearly anything in there. You are more than just the role that you play at work. You are more than just one of the roles you play at home. You're more than this one behavior that you've done, whatever. It almost like takes the importance that, or the value that you have as a human being, and helps you see how much more vast that is, and how connected to how many different other aspects of people and the world that there is, versus just this one tiny sliver that we tend to focus on depending upon the situation that we find ourselves in. I feel like I'm going to drag that one around with me quite a bit, especially we're recording this right before the holiday season. And so going into a season that feels a little bit frenetic sometimes and a little bit crazy sometimes, I feel like that's going to be very grounding and give some good perspective on life as being broader than just one small piece. You know, folks are here on this summit. They've joined us for the next 10 days on this summit to really make some changes, learn some new information and some new tips and things that they can put into action in their lives. What final things do you have to say to this audience, or maybe ideas or inspiration for them as they move through the rest of the summit to make this the best year of their life?
Well, maybe this is just an encapsulation of things that I've, said. I think we can have a really big sense of aspiration, a really big vision. Like, we can truly be happy or integrated, so that the what you just described is that kind of compartmentalization doesn't have to feel so strong or rigid. We can feel we are who we are with predominant values, whether we're at work or we're at home or whatever. We really can do that. And it's worth kind of writing down or etching out that narrative. Like, what is the story of our lives? Is it, tranquil and alert, or is it, you should look any damn man in the eye and tell him to go to hell? And just do that reflection. And remember, it's every single day that we can make it real in very small ways sometimes, but they count. Like that woman at work on the phone with those complaining customers. And the key is being able to begin again and having some compassion toward oneself, because any path involves ups and downs and ebbs and flows, and just continually waking up to that.
So helpful. Sharon, you're such a sought after expert and visionary in this space. Where can people connect with you, learn more about you, the Insight Center? I mean, give us all the details as to where we can connect with you.
Well, my website is SharonSalzberg.com. Salzberg with an E, not a U, even though spell check's going to try to change it to U. And the center is the Insight Meditation Society.
Amazing. This has been so helpful, and a conversation that I feel like if you're on this summit and you've listened to it to this point, go back and listen again, because there's a deeper meaning underneath so much of what Sharon has shared. If you think about some of the insights she's shared and apply them either more broadly in your life or more deeply in a particular area, I find that there are a few pieces that are really sticking with me as I'm leaving this conversation. And I know that they are going to deepen just as I think about them in the coming days and weeks. So Sharon, this has been fantastic. We just really appreciate you sharing this time with us and your expertise and your wisdom.
Well, thank you so much.